Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. You have reached Venus Unplugged at the Virtual Heartbreak Hotel. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. And what we do here is we explore the dimensions of Venus. You know, Venus as a verb, Venus as an active ingredient in our being, as heartbreak, as transformation. She is very important in our culture. And so that's what we're exploring. And we're doing that through myth and dream and story and all those kind of really cool things of psyche. So we left off cliffhanger last week. We are exploring the story, the fairy tale of Snow White, which is an amazing fairy tale of the individuation process, the steps towards maturity. That's essentially what individuation means. The painful steps, the itsy-bitsy steps, again and again and again, to become mature, to become whole, to experience the fullness of who we are. And it's interesting how very few people make that part of their living experience or their being. They want all sorts of things, but very few people realize it's maturity. It's wisdom. I don't want to be run by my immature, infantile, puella, nonsense stuff story we're telling ourselves. No, I want to be wise. Or at least attempt to. But it's a lifetime process. So, we left off and last time with Snow White, and the huntsman set her free. It's the first time Snow White actually opens up her mouth, okay? And she asks to be set free. Please don't kill me. And she promises that she'll go into the woods, never to be heard from again. The huntsman takes pity on her because she's beautiful. Which I think is interesting, not because it's true or it's right or you shouldn't be killing 7-year-olds. It's because she is beautiful. So there's something there about Venus that helps in the individual process, because the individuation process, once again, is this maturity. So we need a certain amount of an attitude towards beauty, beauty of heart, beauty of being, not just the egotistical beauty of form. So that's a hint. So then she runs, okay, and the story tells us, then she begins to run, and she runs over these sharp stones and through the thorns, and all the wild animals race past her, but they do not harm her. She ran as long as her feet could move until it was about to go dark, and then she saw a little house and went in to rest. In this little house, everything was small, but so delicate and so tidy that words can't describe it. When it had gotten dark, the masters of the little house came home, and they were the 7 dwarfs who dig in the mountains for ore. Now, right here, the number 7, all right, the number 7 is actually the number of Venus. If you look at sacred geometry, the number 7 is a 4. Okay, and then a triangle in the 7, within the 4. A square and a triangle within a square. So the 4 sides of the triangle, the 3 sides of the, I got that one mixed up, didn't I? The 4 sides of the square and the 3 sides of the triangle create 7. 7 is the number of the day, 7 is the number of the planets, 7 is the age of reason. At the age of 7, usually a child knows the difference between right and wrong, and therefore is capable of sin. Or so they say. So it's powerful. So at the age of 7, she's threatened, her life is threatened by this queen. And who is this stepmother queen? Well, you know, in fairy tales, as in life, you know, the story we're telling ourselves is really all aspects of ourselves. So no matter what you think another has done or what you've been, the way to maturity is to be able to say, I don't care what they did, or I don't care what I think they did, or what I feel they did, or what they did do. My job is to get the hell out of this. My job is to not to be scarred for life. You know, you can attack, but you're not going to stay that way. You know, the enemy, or the supposed enemy, or whoever we cast in our little fairy tales, who we want the enemy to be, okay? Psyche chooses very well, because they're going to play out the story for us. So here is, you know, Snow White, this young, developing, beautiful part of ourselves, this soul that doesn't really know and is alone, this motherless child, as very often we feel and are. You know, usually it's people who are motherless who are going to go on a path of individuation, because they know they need to work towards something meaningful. Okay? So, here we have it. So the huntsman or the gamekeeper, you know, he deceives the queen, and the gamekeeper brings back, and remember she tells him, and bring me back the lungs and the liver. Last week I said the heart, but that's probably my stuff. This is the lungs and the liver, okay? And that's what she wants back as proof that he's killed Snow White. So what he does is he gets an animal's liver and lungs, which he takes to Snow White's stepmother, and she eats it with gusto. That's what envy does. It devours our lungs, our capacity for spirit, our capacity for the breath of life, and the liver, which is the seat of the soul. Anytime we fall in love, believe me, your liver follows. Or an event happens in our life that we need to understand. We're going to, you know, we upset the liver. And that's when we know an alchemical process has begun. Okay? So the evil queen stepmother is, she's motherless. She's all-consuming. So that also the part of us where we have this cold, motherless queen who's very judgmental of us, okay, is consuming and literally wants to eat us up, as compared with the giving mother, who love strengthens the child. She signifies the tendency in every person to use the emotions selfishly and thus harm their object. In this way, the person harms not only the other, but also the Snow White in oneself. So that's the nature of projection. What projection will do, okay, how do we know we're projecting? It's material that comes from ourselves. If you're projecting, all right, or somebody's projecting onto you, if it really doesn't fit, you just go like, wow, that's kind of interesting, how this works. It won't faze you. Kind of comes as a curiosity. But, you know, if you get twisted out of joint and just go off in a rage and blah, 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 there's some of your projected material in that. You know, it's a match, and it's a mix-up. And it starts what's called a putrefactio. We get the liver goes wild. How could they say that? How could they do that? But when it's a projection and we know, it's just like, wow, that's trippy. I wonder where they got that one from. Comes as information. So that's part of discerning. Now, after, all right, so Snow White is off. She's running through the hills and the dales and going into the forest deeper and deeper. And she's going over mountains. And so this is everything that we go through, the Snow White goes through within us. Fairy tales give details of what's about ready to happen. So anytime after we have a violent confrontation with others, we're all alone with our feelings. And very often a wild loneliness surrounds us. And we don't know what to go, and we don't know where to do. So there's a temptation. Sometimes it's like, just let it all lie. Just let it lie. Let me feel my way through this. And sometimes that works. That's the right. And then there's other times, now we need to be careful, because when there's lethargy, which pushes the responsibility off and on others, and being able to wait until the time is fulfilled. So in almost all fairy tales, there is a need for extensive wandering and the fulfillment of many tasks before the magic spell is lifted. So that's important. There are times we just lay low, and there are other times we get to work where we have to say, all right, what was really going on? And we mine what's going on in our psyche and the 7 dwarfs within. Now, the interesting thing, of course, in the Walt Disney, he names the 7 dwarfs. In the fairy tale, the dwarfs have no names. They can represent, just dwarfed ideas, just things that, they work, they mine. Now, it's interesting because dwarfs as elementals, they dig for gold and copper. And copper is the metal of Venus, and gold is the metal of consciousness. So there's always these hints along the way. Kind of keep our eye or keep our heart on the ball why we're doing this, because very often we'll get into a situation and we don't know what to do. And because we don't know what to do, we do the wrong thing because we got to be active. Instead of saying, let me sit with this before I open my mouth or I judge. What's really going on inside of me? Who is speaking? Is the evil queen speaking? Is the huntsman who is working? He can be a positive animus male figure within or a negative because he's doing the bidding of the witch. He takes Snow White into the forest. He is going to kill her. And then he changes his mind. So there's that in us too. We need to look at that. That's where we need good counsel. That's where we need to reflect. That's why we write down our dreams. That's why we, go to mentors and ask people and read books and take workshops. We want to understand also those, that's 7 dwarfs. So this queen, that's what she's busy doing, all right? And she is the motherless one. She is the cold queen with that narcissistic defense mechanism and that talking mirror. But the mirror also tells the truth. She says, no, there's one more beautiful. And the one more beautiful is the soul, which is what Snow White represents. So now Snow White flees, and she goes over the 7 hills until she reaches the cottage where the 7 dwarfs are. So what's with the 7, all these 7s, okay? You need to get alerts with numbers, okay, in fairy tales or dreams. They're a world within a world right there, all right? So as she's escaping, Snow White's escape route over the hills suggests steps of development which are necessitated by the inner conflict. That's important. This is all arranged by your psyche. It doesn't feel perfect to the ego, but it is. And when people say, no, I've done that, I know that. You couldn't know it because you're still reacting so strongly. When you know it, really know it, it's just like, wow, here it is, here but for the grace of God. I know that one. I've been to that cold part of hell. I know that. But if we're still protesting, we still have more shadow material. Once again, shadow is not negative. It's just what we don't know, or it's what we don't know how to work with. So remember the episode with Snow White? It's like Snow White's, where's Snow White's inner bitch? Where is the one where she protests and says, you're not doing this to me? She doesn't say a lot in this. Everybody's saying things to her, and certainly we know that this queen is not going to give up, because when she realizes that it was in fact not Snow White's liver and lungs, but in animals, which is an interesting thing, because even though she is the evil queen, the huntsman hands her something to eat and digest, which is the animal nature, the instinctual, warm animal nature, which this queen does not have. For those of us that have animals or love animals, we know that it brings up the best part of us, hopefully. If people are wounding animals, they're not even connected to their humanity, which is what we see and why we get so upset when we see people or anybody abused. But so the queen, in even though she's totally motivated to destroy Snow White, she is still offered resolution. And this is just one level of interpreting this fairy tale. That's the astounding things about dreams and fairy tales. They're infinite, absolutely infinite. They're solid. They have a past. We just can't make up things as we go along. I mean, this has some truth, but this is the images that we're looking at. All right? So now Snow White, all right, she flees over the 7 hills and 7 mountains. Her escape route over the hills suggests steps of individuation necessitated by the conflict. The 7 hills corresponds, among other things, to the 7 stages of transformation and alchemy, which also represent stages of development. A higher level is meant before we go down to the valley, in the middle of the conflict, all right? Because conflicts in our stories, the plot begins, and we go up, and then we go down, and we go up and down. Sometimes for years we tell ourselves the story until we get through the details of each stage of development, and then suddenly we wake up and we have a mature attitude. So once we get something into perspective, and we can look down at it, so to speak, it's less immediate, and we can get outside ourselves and our own passions. So after Snow White climbs, and she's given shelter by the 7 dwarfs. So what's their significance? In mythology and superstition, dwarfs are usually skillful and hardworking beings. They possess secret treasures, and they dig for them, just as gold miners dig in the fairy tale. So this means that they search for buried values. Now, in folklore, dwarfs, there's male and females, but there are no children, and they don't die. So that's interesting. So it's a constant. And they're very creative, okay? Their small size mean they embody psychological possibilities which seem small and unimportant, but are in fact very potent. So it is, once again, those things that seem so small in our lives, but we can run right by them. But then when we go over the story 10,000 times in the middle of our head, it's like, wait a second. And there's that wonderful exercise of, I remember, I don't remember. This is a time we should use that. It's a writing exercise where we write what we don't remember. It's amazing what we don't remember. Very often these little small details. Or when we see it in, TV mysteries or whatever, it's like, oh, is that little detail, itsy bitsy little detail, wait a second. And we start pulling on that thread, and we're going to find the answer. Or we're going to find the path, or the solution, or the lie. Or the lie we're telling ourselves. Because if we get triggered every time we retell ourselves the story, particularly about another person, we've got the charge. I know that's hard to hear. But in the mature world, okay, and in wisdom, we know it's not blame. We're co-creators. What was I thinking of when I trusted that person? Why did I accept their envy as truth Envy will always blame the other person. And if you're not aware that they're motivated by envy, there's a part of you could go like, wow, maybe I really am bad. Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not. And bad parts of good people and, same parts of crazy people and all of that. It's all of it. We're all part of this. All right. So that's one of the little details. Wait a second. What does that mean when we tell ourselves the story again and again? All right? So their small size embodies psychological possibilities. Seem unimportant, but they're very potent. And also, dwarfs very often have access to secret knowledge and wisdom and popular imagination, and from time to time give advice. Sometimes it's helpful, and sometimes it's just twisting with you. Because dwarfs, in Maria von Franz's book, what the hell is it? The Feminine and Fairy Tales. She talks about, the positive aspect of the dwarf and the negative, because the dwarf can be a meanie and really play with people. All right. So in this particular case, the dwarfs, okay, they're positive, they're helpful. And in this small size, they're helping. So Snow White gets into and sees their little house and goes in there. So another significant aspect of the dwarfs is their small size, which emphasize in this story that when Snow White enters her cottage, everything is so small when she walks in, but neater and cleaner than words can tell. The small size seems to suggest the relativity of our usual dimensions. On coming to the dwarfs, Snow White experiences a world with different dimensions. And very often, when we go into the depths, it's a small, itsy-bitsy, and we don't quite understand it. But when we blow libido into it, which means we give it more information, we look at it, we examine it, we magnify it, we do active imagination, and so slowly we start to see what this little turd, which we think is just this little dust or turd, is actually a diamond. So on coming to the dwarf, Snow White experiences a world with different dimensions, so to speak. And this is a common experience when one comes into contact with the Snow White within, or the Snow White of the unconscious. So in the deeper levels of the unconscious, a serious conflict, like the one described in Snow White, can, if followed through with honesty, bring a person into contact with the deeper levels of the psyche in which time and place become relative. Who knew? Powerful fairy tales. And your own telling of your own story and your own tale, which we need to tell again and again until we start understanding what it's about. So, in essence, we see the dwarfs as benevolent, creative, spiritual forces helping Snow White to solve the apparently insoluble conflict. You got this crazy stepmother who's made it very clear she wants you dead. And there is a driving force in everyone's psyche. The addiction to perfection. Wants you dead. So don't be romantic about that one. The anorexia, which is part of that is, and bulimia is part of that, is the addiction to perfection. It says die if you're not perfect. What? I haven't even lived yet. What do you mean I'm going to die? But we have to get very clear on that message. I mean, we are clear because, you're starving yourself to death. It's a negative mother because it has to do with, it's not one's personal mother, although it can be, but it's the negative side of the great mother. Remember, this is a tale of individuation for the feminine. And so the mothers are also the great mother, not one's personal mother. So we've got these 7 possibilities within us, or the 7 steps. So this is kind of in contrast to the prince, who's just, the prince shows up. He's later, and he's the actual one who's the positive animist. But we got to get through like a whole bunch of stuff here. And there are 7 small lights instead of one big one. In psychological terms, this means that there are various helpful insights and thoughts here, but as yet no total connected view of an all-embracing chain of thought, which is to deal with the conflict. That's why, we need to have several sessions if we're going to work on something. It's not going to come out in just one. We need all those little different insights. We walk away like, God, that's interesting, but we're not quite finished. It means we've got to come back. We've got to look again. We've got to go back to that story again, or read the fairy tale again, or find another book that helps you interpret the fairy tales. Okay? So Snow White is allowed to stay with the dwarfs if she does the housework for them. So it tells you must work hard with these spirits. She can't just sit around doing nothing. We have to work hard towards maturity and individuation. So similarly, when a woman is in emotional conflict and she can find some relief, at least temporarily, is dedicated to work that serves the added purpose of cleaning up her psychic house. So we get to, once again, Cinderella cleans in the kitchen, and Psyche has to bring order. Remember the first task of Psyche? She has to bring order to the seeds. There's always this task, tedious, small, relentless, but we have to do it. Otherwise, we're not going to get any insight. Or people may take an insight and quote it, but they haven't earned that. It feels tinny. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't. There's a part that goes like, I don't know about that one. Sounds like it could be truth, but there's no root in it. That's because the person just took it, said it, or like when somebody says, well, that's your karma. Well, you know what? You don't know what somebody's karma is, because we don't know if we're coming and going, and the whole concept of karma is misunderstood as kind of spiritual revenge. Well, you'll get yours. That's not what karma is. Karma is simply the law of cause and effect. You will make a choice, and by what returns to you, you will see the wisdom of that choice. It's not bookkeeping. So we've got to kind of reframe that one. It's very, very common for people too. That's their secret shadow. And that's your karma. You're going to get it. No, we don't know. Because it's not about revenge. It's like, well, we're going to see what the results of their action is. And it could be, it's none of our business. So here we are with the dwarfs. Snow White is set up. She's got a job. She's housekeeping, and they care for her. But also, once again, what this indicates is that the dwarfs are also limited. So she can stay there for a while. Like we can all stay in a place just doing the homework and doing the housework for a while. But sometimes we realize we're living in shoes too small for ourselves. And then something comes along, like what's going to happen next week, where the queen realizes that, I ate an animal's liver and lungs, and I'm coming to get her because, once again, the mirror tells her, sorry, Snow White's alive and growing more and more beautiful. So that's what we have to look forward to. So as you look through your day, see what are the 7 little things in your life that you're probably looking at right now. They're usually things that we resist. It's like, oh, no, that's so little. I want to do the big thing. It's like, really? You know what? I call it stuffing lentils. It's like a pile of lentils. I could thank you so much. I'll just stuff these until it is time that I'm learning something, or shine on and shine off. So this is, I'm going to sign off And next week we will continue with this teaching tale of Snow White, your own young and beautiful soul that wants to transform. Till next week, au revoir, bye.